I've been using the new M4 13-inch iPad Pro extensively for a little less than a week now. I also got to play with it for a few minutes when it debuted at Apple's New York City event, which was really cool. Nonetheless though, I and many of you have had the same duality of reactions or thoughts about this thing. You know, it's clear the hardware in here is outstanding. Like, it's the best I've ever seen in a device ever. But the question is the M4 iPad Pro too ambitious? We've been here before. Back in 2021, we were surprised with Apple's implementation of the formerly Mac-exclusive M1 chip into the 5th gen iPad Pro models, along with a really sweet Pro Display XDR level panel into the 12.9-inch models. But iPadOS 14 and then iPadOS 15 were just lacking and didn't really harness the Mac-level power in the way we had hoped it would. And while iPadOS has come a long way, particularly with external display support and more proper Pro apps, we're having a little 2018 and 2021 iPad Pro deja vu, if you ask me, if you get my drift, which I'll remind you more of later. So yeah, in this video I want to talk about what makes this tablet so absolutely incredible, but potentially too ambitious if Apple doesn't complement it with the right software next month at the unofficially AI-centric Dub 2024. But first I want to briefly talk about the people that made today's video possible, Anker and their genius little 3-in-1 power bank. Quite often when I'm rushing out the door, I have to quickly decide whether to throw a charger or portable battery bank into my bag or pocket. But with the 3-in-1, you get the best of both worlds. First up, it's a compact, pocketable, and great-looking charger with a built-in USB-C cable. It's constructed out of high-quality glossy and matte plastic and comes in black, along with pastel pink, blue, and this white, which is definitely more my style. More importantly though, it can charge your devices at up to 30 watts wired. But under the hood, you get a whopping 5,000 milliamp hour battery that can charge your devices at up to 22.5 watts. The battery is also accompanied by a clean built-in indicator screen, which can tell you how much charge you have remaining. The cable also serves as a carrying strap when you're using it like a portable battery bank. Best of all, if you're using the 3-in-1 as a traditional wall charger, not only can you charge up to 2 devices at once plugged in with its USB-C output port and that built-in USB-C cable, the battery inside itself charges through the wall simultaneously, which is really cool. This way, it's charged up and ready to go without much preparation beforehand. All you have to do is use it. You can also charge the 30 watt via USB-C too if you don't have access to a wall outlet, which is really nice as well. Overall, this is a genius little product that I know for a fact I'll be using all the time. They also have a 10K or 10,000 milliamp hour version, which they were kind enough to send in this dope little gift box that also included an additional 30 watt and this Anker branded bag. So thanks again to Anker for this package and for sponsoring this video. And of course, I'll leave a link to everything in the video description down below. Okay, so first up, let's talk about how wildly, impossibly thin this tablet is. I didn't ask for this change either, you know, like it wasn't on my wish list before the event, but boy, am I glad they went this route because it makes a night and day difference when handling this tablet just by itself, and especially when using it with their redesigned, for now, iPad Pro exclusive Magic Keyboard. This iPad keyboard combo is a hair thicker than the beloved and already super slim MacBook Air, as you can see here, which is really impressive. However, I will be saving my thoughts on the keyboard for a separate video coming soon. All I'll say here is that it's way better and much more MacBook-like, which I'm a huge fan of. I'd also go as far to say that both components together here make for an experience that's like 50 to 100% better over the last situation, which was a lot thicker, clunkier, and heavier. But again, stay tuned for an entire video dedicated to this. So to sum up design, it seems that they've made this thing, like, from what I can eyeball, 35% thicker than like one of those newer MacBook displays by itself, which is wild. But again, I can totally understand how a lot of you think that on paper, making this tablet thinner doesn't seem like a necessary change. I mean, after all, the last gen iPad Pros were already fairly thin, especially the 11-inch, which lacked that mini LED display. But as I've been saying here, once you use this thing in person, particularly the thinner 5.1 millimeter thick 13-inch model, I think you may also come to find that this new thinness drastically improves the entire experience and makes the iPad Pro far more compelling to use regularly. But what about battery life? Does it now last 2 hours, 2 minutes? I've seen a lot of people assume this because, yeah, wouldn't a slimmer chassis mean less space to pack battery? Well, yes, but if you're worried about screen on time, the new chip inside with its Gen 2 TSMC 3nm silicon and Apple's in-house optimization and architecture will give you the same kind of battery life from previous models. And although I haven't had this thing for long enough to really be scientific, from the few days of usage that I've had, I can attest to that for the most part. I'll also talk about processor and performance later in this video, so stick around for that. But anyway, this thing is thin with little to no compromise, unless of course you want to absolutely, deliberately, brute force bend this thing just to say that you can. I'm sure Zach or jerry-rig everything is going to, and good for him, that's his shtick, all due respect, he did that with previous gen models too that were even thicker. Otherwise, just appreciate how nice and thin this thing is, and I don't know, be nice to your tech. You don't even have to baby it, just be smart with it. Throw a folio or a case on it. Don't sit on it. Don't brute force bend it. If you're able to bench more than 250, I guess, it's not going to snap in half under normal to slightly tense circumstances. Oh, and last thing before I move on here, space black looks so good, especially in this near sheet of glass that we have here. I'm a sucker for white and silver products, but I'm glad that this is the model I ended up with. Next up though, let's talk about the display. And I may be wrong, but I truthfully don't think there's anything out there better right now with regard to contrast and color and brightness and more. And I mean, sure, newer iPhones and other OLED equipped smartphones technically get brighter, but without getting super duper technical, 1,000 nits of sustained brightness in any case scenario or SDR conditions, in other words, not just while viewing high contrast, high dynamic range or HDR content that only makes small portions of your display brighter to make the highlights pop. Yeah, this completely sustained full screen wide brightness is way easier to achieve on smaller OLED displays than on a tablet or a TV. Meanwhile, at 11 to 13 inches in this razor thin body, the M4 iPad Pro achieves the same smartphone level 1,000 nits of sustained typical or SDR brightness at any given time in any app, on your home screen, you name it, completely unlike its mini LED equipped M1 and M2 iPad Pro 12.9 inch only predecessors, which could only max out at 1,000 nits in some XDR cases and 1,600 nits in HDR cases. This crazy new brightness is accomplished two ways. One, Apple is one of the, if not the first to ship out a product with what they call a tandem OLED display. In layman's terms, they've stacked two identical OLED displays on top of one another, essentially doubling brightness compared to just one panel and achieving an unprecedented 2 million to 1 contrast ratio in the process. This is why they're calling it their Ultra Retina XDR display, which sounds like ridiculous marketing, but for context, this contrast ratio and brightness is nearly double to double compared to what you're getting with the previous gen mini LED liquid Retina XDR displays in Apple's MacBook Pros, the last gen iPad Pro 12.9 inch models, and even their $5,000 Pro Display XDR with a 1 million to 1 contrast ratio. So yeah, Ultra Retina does seem fitting for hardware this impressive, and it's an exciting new standard in Apple's pursuit to deliver stellar display quality in their products. But this insane brightness and contrast introduces a new challenge for other hardware involved. When physically stacking two displays, you have to make sure they are working in tandem, or in other words, perfectly synced up while in use, in this case at up to 120 Hertz. This brings us to the second way the display quality is made possible, with a brand new processor. And to finally speak of the devil, the speed demon that is the chip inside here, our next topic of discussion is the brand new M4 chip. That's right, a brand new generation of M processor put first in an iPad of all devices. Why? Why? Well, as I was just saying, a new chip was needed to make this stacked display tech work, since keeping two high-resolution, high-refresh rate displays synced up is a technical feat by itself. That's why Apple has baked in a new display driving engine into the M4 to make this tandem OLED display situation work without flaw. And again, this new aspect of the M4 series of chips is super exciting, since we know that this tech is probably going to drive equally impressive displays in or for Macs moving forward. But equally important, of course, is the performance and power efficiency gains here with TSMC's Gen 2 3nm process. Not only are we getting substantial CPU and GPU gains that we also got with the Apple M3 chips, we also get much better power efficiency that literally enables this iPad to be this insanely thin while delivering their quoted all-day typical battery life. So again, like I said earlier, no need to worry about crappy battery life, although your mileage may vary just like it did with previous models. Another thing to note is that on paper, the M4 is a bit faster than the binned 11-core M3 Pro equipped MacBook Pro, which you can get for $1,800 to $2,000. Super impressive. I reviewed this device earlier this year, and I can confidently say that it's a proper powerhouse which can accommodate some consistently heavy workflows. So again, it's nice to know that on paper, a similarly priced 1 to 2 terabyte iPad Pro is going to get you roughly the same performance with more internal storage, albeit 2 gigs less of unified memory, less connectivity, no internal fan, or built-in keyboard and trackpad. Oh, and before I forget to mention, the new iPad Pro is actually, at least on paper, pretty thermally sound. Apple has implemented graphite into the chassis and copper into the logo to keep things from getting too toasty, which is just insane, like crazy stuff going on here. But with all this said, as everyone is screaming, including me, what good is all this performance and innovation if this whole experience still doesn't quite match the capabilities of a Mac? Well, this rhetorical question leads us to the sort of neutral, possibly negative, but hopefully hopeful end of this video. The success of the M4 iPad Pro and iPad Pro in general depends on Apple's willingness to take it more seriously software-wise and to make it more Mac comparable. Not Mac identical, but similar enough to a Mac in capability with the next version of iPadOS. As I've said earlier, we've been in this situation before. Incredible hardware with somewhat lacking software. Take the even more impressive for their time iPad Pro 2018 models. They blew everyone out of the water, but they were nerfed by literal iPhone OS or iOS 12 when they launched. But if you remember, Apple quickly remedied this with iPadOS 13, which was at the time really dope and promising, and definitely made the iPad stand apart for once from its debut, or since its debut in 2010. But then from 2020 until now, even though the iPads have gotten crazy powerful and capable hardware, iPadOS just hasn't caught up in the ways we had hoped. I mean, sure, there are definitely many quality of life changes that have been implemented along the way, which are no doubt important and hopefully lay a lot of the groundwork for something even better. For example, we got Stage Manager and external monitor support, which was definitely an important step in the right direction. But it was a little wonky and half-baked if you remember when it first debuted in 2022. Thankfully though, it has definitely become more refined and usable with subsequent updates and time. But again, even though iPadOS 17 is the most advanced operating system on an iPad so far, not to mention it is accompanied by several real pro apps, first and third party, more so than any other tablet it's competing with, the day-to-day operations are bogged down by this sort of limited iPad framework that makes getting anything done more clunky and sort of juvenile. However, I really wouldn't mind, and I'd probably enjoy this general experience if it was standard while just using this iPad in like tablet mode. Having more touch-oriented controls and bulkier UI makes sense in this case. But when attached to a keyboard or a display, I expect the OS and apps to have more Mac-like menus and controls, not to mention a better use of screen space. And since we're now paying, what, $1,000+ for each model here, not to mention hundreds more for the new Magic Keyboard too, these iPad Pros better operate somewhat like a Mac in the near future, or there's really no reason to spend this much money on one unless you're someone who really loves and relies on the Apple Pencil for your workflow. And speaking of which, the new Apple Pencil Pro is pretty nifty. Yeah, it's a very similar experience, looks identical. It's literally thicker than the new iPad Pro itself, if that tells you anything. The changes made also seem subtle individually, but altogether, the new Pencil is a fantastic tool you're going to want to pick up with one of these new iPads, and is well worth the $129 you're paying for it, more so than the second gen, which we've had for quite a while, which, you know, has kind of had a steep price if you ask me. But just like with the Magic Keyboard, I'll go over it in more depth in a separate video review coming soon as well. So in short, the new M4 iPad Pro models are astounding. I mean, literally a collection of the best hardware I've ever seen in nearly every way, with the exception of the battery and camera, which are largely unchanged, or in the former's case, technically downgraded with the lack of an ultra-wide camera that nobody ever really used. Although the new adaptive flash feature may make up for it, which makes scanning documents far more intuitive in varying lighting conditions, I digress though. All of this ambitious hardware needs to be accompanied with ambitious new software or a proper hybrid Mac comparable OS. Otherwise, we are once again looking at a largely glorified note-taking, sketching, and web surfing device that puts its incredible tech innovations to waste. Now that does sound a bit bleak and negative, but hey, I and many of you have been waiting for iPadOS to get better for, the better part of, what is it now, 4 years? But with that said, a lot has happened between Q1 and Q2 of 2020 to now that definitely played a part in Apple's neglect of the iPad lineup. For starters, COVID messed everything up, no explanation needed, and that lasted into 2021. The more lucrative Mac lineup also needed rescuing desperately, and that Apple Silicon transition effort was publicly seen from late 2020 through mid-2023 with years of unseen development beforehand, no doubt. The iPhone and iPad mini also got massive upgrades in late 2021 with the launch of the 6th gen, 13 Pro, and 13 Pro Max. Apple Watch Ultra blew us away in late 2022, and finally, for the past 8 years, pre-COVID, pre-iPad Pro 2018, Apple Vision Pro was in the works, and for those of you who haven't properly used it yet, this thing most definitely took Apple's best engineers to make happen, because it's literally alien Area S5 level tech if you pay attention to just how well everything works for it being a first-gen product. It's practically iPhone 2.0 in my book. More importantly though, at least for this video, it runs iPad apps and scales windows a lot like Stage Manager does in iPadOS. With all of this said though, and factoring in the insane hardware we have in these new iPad Pros, I would be shocked if Apple didn't finally give us what we've been hoping for nearly half a decade. We've been playing this waiting waiting game, and I've at least been doing this process of elimination in my head. All that to say, all arrows point towards an ambitious iPadOS release, in hindsight, way more now than in previous years. But who knows? Will we be delighted or disappointed in less than a month? We'll have to find out. Until then, I will continue to enjoy this absolutely gorgeous piece of technology and pray to God they actually give it a fighting chance to prove itself and absolutely demolish the hybrid market. And that about wraps things up. I hope this video was helpful and insightful. Expect my full review of this thing coming later in the month once I've actually used it for long enough. Also expect some content about the 13-inch iPad Air and new accessories coming soon as well. Check out my links to Anker, my socials, and my Skyline 2 wallpaper pack down below. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.